There are places in the world where silence is not empty, it listens. Under the hills of Kentucky, there is a darkness so vast it once swallowed entire rivers. Tourists walk its edges, smiling for photos. But some wander deeper, beyond the routes with names and guides. And there, in that deep hush where sound forgets itself, voices wait. Some echo back, some do not. Beneath the mossy hills of western Kentucky, the earth is hollow. Not empty, but hollow. Winding, stretching, breathing in stone. Mammoth Cave is a name that barely fits. It's not a cave, but a system, miles upon miles of corridors, shafts, domes, pits. More than 400 miles charted, hundreds more suspected. And still, no one truly knows where it ends. Above ground, the Green River cuts softly through the landscape, slow and green as glass. Below it, the cave winds deeper than light, deeper than logic. It's older than any town near it, older than the state that claimed it, older even than the tribes that told stories about the ground rumbling in its sleep. The surface gives no sign of what lies beneath. Trees bend in the breeze. Birds chatter without concern. But the moment you step below, through the mouth of the cave, the air changes. Cooler, denser, as if the cave is not a place, but a lung that breathes and remembers. Local guides call it the breathing stone. It's true in a scientific sense. The barometric pressure above ground affects airflow below. When the weather changes, the cave exhales with a wind that pushes against your skin like breath from something ancient. But the older guides, the retired ones, the ones who stopped offering tours years ago, they say something else. Something softer. They say the cave is alive, in a way we don't have words for. They say it remembers every footstep, every breath, every voice that dared to speak its own name inside the dark. In 1925, a man named Harold Kinney vanished into Mammoth Cave. Harold wasn't a miner or a spelunker. He was a government-employed surveyor, a mapmaker. He worked for the Kentucky Geological Survey, part of an effort to catalog the cave system more thoroughly after tourism began to expand. He was 34, clean-spoken, and methodical. His leather-bound journals are filled with neat, evenly spaced notes, elevation changes, rock composition, humidity levels. On March 12th, Harold entered the cave with 2 other workers. They split off after a mile to trace a known route, while Harold took a side tunnel that hadn't been fully mapped. It was a routine divergence. They agreed to rendezvous in 4 hours. Only 2 came back. No scream, no cave-in, no trace. Just gone. The men searched until their lanterns began to flicker. More joined them in the coming days. Miners, volunteers, soldiers. Dogs were brought in. No scent trails. No boot prints. His body was never recovered. His notebook, however, was found wedged into a crevice a week later. The last entry was brief. Written in shaking ink, the line read, "Why does the echo answer late?" That phrase has become a local oddity, passed down between rangers like Folklore. It's been printed on a postcard in the visitor's center. But no one really talks about it anymore. Not in any serious way. It's a footnote, something quirky, tragic, historic. But for some, it still stirs something deeper. Because Harold Kinney wasn't the only one to vanish. Over the years, the cave has had patterns. In 1951, a college student named Margaret Dunn wandered into a closed shaft while on a geology tour. They found her flashlight 3 miles from the point she was last seen, still warm. No footprints around it. In 1987, an amateur explorer named Carlos Fenton reportedly spent 2 nights in a sealed chamber that rangers insist doesn't exist. When he was found, dazed, dehydrated, alive, he told park staff, "There's another layer beneath the floor." I walked straight, but kept arriving backward. His journals were confiscated. He was released from the hospital 2 days later and disappeared from public view. No deaths were confirmed. No crime scenes marked. But in Mammoth Cave, people don't always go missing in dramatic ways. Sometimes they return wrong, distant, with gaps in memory or stories that seem overwritten by something quieter, something echoing. There's a theory among fringe folklorists that the cave doesn't just distort space, but memory. They talk about something called phantom distance, a term found scribbled in the margins of early survey maps. It describes an experience where a hiker travels a path, turns back, and finds the return stretch inexplicably longer or shorter. One such note from 1936 reads, "Measured twice. First, 0.25 miles. Second, 0.32. No deviation in path. Only in time." Of course, scientists point to natural explanations: fatigue, disorientation, inconsistencies in terrain. But even they admit Mammoth Cave is an anomaly. A system so complex it creates its own weather patterns. A place where GPS fails, where compasses misbehave. The stories, however, remain persistent. Not loud, not sensational, just persistent. And the quietest stories are often the ones you don't realize you've carried until they whisper themselves to life. Alone, in the dark, surrounded by stone that does not forget. There's a spot in the cave, one rarely visited now. A curved corridor called Dizzy Loop by old guides. It was once open to small tour groups, until too many guests reported dizziness, nausea, or a sense of being watched. Some said the loop never quite ended, as if they had walked in a spiral and exited through their own entrance without realizing it. It's closed now, not sealed, just quietly unlisted on maps. One guide, a soft-spoken veteran with 30 years of caving experience, once said off record, "You don't get lost in Mammoth Cave. You get remembered by it. And if you're not careful, it remembers a version of you that didn't leave." What begins as geology becomes myth. What begins as a missing hiker becomes a pattern. And what begins as a whisper becomes a voice. Not yours. Not the caves, but something in between. They arrived on a Tuesday. Quiet season. Early fall. The kind of air that carries no urgency, just a long exhale from summer. Maya Ellis and Jordan Sorrell weren't tourists. Not exactly. They were filmmakers, content creators with a modest but growing YouTube channel focused on forgotten American landscapes. Old towns, overgrown cemeteries, abandoned mines. Not for cheap scares. Their audience followed them for something quieter. Atmosphere, curiosity, human history with cracked edges. Mammoth Cave was meant to be their next entry. Something different. Bigger. Older. Stranger. But the official tours didn't interest them. The lighted corridors, the carefully worded plaques, the groups in matching helmets. They wanted depth. Shadows. Something the brochures didn't know how to talk about. Maya had a reason. She brought something with her. Folded inside a waterproof pouch, tucked at the bottom of her pack beneath cables, batteries, and snack bars. A map. Old. Yellowed. The kind of paper that feels brittle at the corners, but soft at the creases from being folded 1,000 times. It had belonged to her great-grandfather, Thomas Ellis, a park surveyor in the 1950s. He died before she was born. The map was left in a box of his belongings, passed down through family hands, barely noticed until Maya took interest in Mammoth's deeper lore. It wasn't like the maps available at the visitor center. There were no friendly icons, no clearly marked restrooms or exits. Just narrow charcoal lines, intersecting like veins. Some labeled in ink, Echo Hall, Cleft Ridge, the false path. Others marked only by red circles or excess. And then a sentence, faint, handwritten across the bottom edge of the parchment. Some lines change after dark. Jordan raised his eyebrows when she showed it to him over diner coffee the night before their descent. "It's a gimmick," he said. "Part of the mythology." Maya just smiled and folded it again. "If it's just a gimmick," she said, "then we're perfectly safe." The next morning, they signed in with park rangers like everyone else. Scheduled their departure and expected return. They were granted permission for a guided backcountry route, one that technically followed older paths now considered inactive but not sealed. But Maya had other plans. They'd follow the sanctioned trail for an hour, then turn off. Just once. Just to find the tunnel. The one from the map. It was easy to spot, if you were looking for it. Beyond a bend marked by a stunted limestone column and a faint draft of cooler air, the passage narrowed. Too narrow to be included on modern tour paths, but not impassable. No fencing. No signage. Just shadow. Maya crouched first, flashlight held low, her other hand trailing the damp wall beside her. Jordan followed reluctantly, muttering something about bad vibes, and "at least tell me when the ghosts show up." The air changed as soon as they ducked inside. Not temperature exactly, more like pressure, as if the tunnel wasn't just empty, but aware of being entered. The cameras came out quickly, one mounted to Jordan's chest, another in Maya's hand. They were used to filming in abandoned places, mines in West Virginia, a flood-damaged sanitarium in Illinois. But this felt different, more present. The walls were smoother here, less disturbed by foot traffic. No graffiti, no trash, no evidence of people, not even old footprints. Just streaks of mineral runoff, slick and shining like veins in the stone. "This looks untouched," Maya whispered. "Or erased," Jordan replied, half joking. Like something didn't want a record. They stopped to check the map. The charcoal lines matched. Their current passage was marked as a thin curve, one of several feeding into a larger oval labeled the Blind Loop. None of this appeared on the printed brochures. Not even in ranger databases Maya had cross-checked. At the next fork, Maya hesitated. The left tunnel was wider, but shallow. The right was narrower, sloped slightly downward, and matched the angle drawn on the map. She chose the right. They walked. It felt like miles, though they couldn't be sure. There were no landmarks, only texture, ceiling height shifts, dampness underfoot, air currents that whispered and vanished. Then came the sound. Playback first. On Maya's camera. During a rest break, Jordan reviewed a few minutes of footage while sipping from his water bladder. His brows furrowed. "You hear that?" he asked. Maya leaned in. On the recording, just beneath their conversation, there was a sound, thin and short, like a whisper. 3 syllables. Not words, just rhythm. Almost like someone exhaling a secret. "Probably us," she said. But it wasn't. They listened again, then checked the second recording. Same moment, same whisper. Later, they'd play it frame by frame and find no visual source. They continued. The passage narrowed, then widened, then narrowed again. At one point, they passed through a chamber so quiet, even their breathing sounded wrong. The kind of wrong that makes you adjust your own body, like something's listening to how your lungs move. Jordan stopped walking. "You ever feel like we're not moving through the cave?" he asked. Maya turned, eyebrows raised. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if it's moving through us?" She didn't answer, just checked the map again. The tunnel on the paper was now unfamiliar. The marks didn't align. A red X that was supposed to be behind them was now ahead. "It's the lighting," Maya muttered. "I misread it." But her voice had less certainty now. They walked for another 45 minutes. Passed 3 junctions. Took only one. At the next pause, Maya unfolded the map again. A new crease had formed. She hadn't made it. More than that, a new tunnel line had appeared. Faint, like a pencil drawing in real time. It traced a curve behind them, a path they hadn't walked. Not yet. She didn't tell Jordan. Instead, she refolded the map, quietly, carefully. Some lines change after dark, and some draw themselves. 3 hours underground, and the cave had already started speaking. Not loudly, not clearly, but often. The first time it happened, they laughed. A quiet chuckle, half spooked and half dismissive. Jordan had been filming Maya from a short distance, her flashlight beam cutting across slick, mineral-stained walls. He played the footage back out of curiosity. For framing, for sound levels. What he heard wasn't either of them. A whisper. Faint. 3 syllables. Not a word. Not quite breath. Just sound. Thread-thin and easy to miss, like something slipping between the cracks of hearing. They rewound it 5 times. Slowed it down. No change. "I didn't say anything," Maya insisted. "I didn't either," Jordan replied, voice quieter than before. They shrugged it off. Background noise, maybe. A dropped sound from an earlier clip. Maybe even interference from one of the cameras. But still, neither said much for the next 30 minutes. Later, while filming a short segment inside a narrow split they labeled the teeth, due to the jagged limestone overhead, the sound returned. But this time, it wasn't on playback. It was in the air. They both stopped walking at the same time, turned their heads, slowly, like people in a theater waiting for a second act that didn't start. 3 words, barely formed, like language through cotton. No direction, no source, just there, hanging in the dark. "What the hell was that?" Jordan whispered. Maya raised her camera. It caught nothing, not even an echo. There was silence again, the thick kind. The kind that holds its breath with you. They began marking their path after that. At first, it was cautious. Chalk arrows, just like explorers had used decades before. Nothing dramatic, just assurance. Direction, a breadcrumb trail made of minerals and trust. But after the 4th turn, they passed a chalk mark they'd already made. Same symbol, same direction. Same crack in the wall nearby, except they hadn't turned around. Jordan grew visibly tense. We're circling. No, Maya said, forcing calm. The cave wins. It can feel like a circle. Then why is my arrow exactly where I left it 15 minutes ago? They moved forward again, quietly. Cameras rolling. Headlamps dimmed now to preserve battery. The tunnel narrowed. Then, for the third time, it happened. The whisper. This time, they both heard it clearly. Not just sound, but language. 3 words, not that way. Jordan froze. Maya turned, expecting him to speak again. But he hadn't. His mouth hadn't moved. They both stared at the air between them, like it had become a third person, present but formless. A few seconds passed. Jordan cleared his throat, the sound too loud in the silence. Maya reached for the map again, her fingers trembling slightly. The tunnel they were in? It didn't appear anymore. Not just moved, gone. The parchment where it should have been was blank. Faded. Not erased, but emptied. Like the path had rejected being remembered. They took a different branch. Left, not right. The air shifted again. Cooler. But not like a draft. More like absence. Jordan started talking to fill the silence, speculating out loud, running theories. Sound vibration patterns. Auditory hallucinations from sensory deprivation. Subconscious voice projection. He threw out everything he could remember from late-night podcasts and undergraduate psychology classes. Maya didn't respond. She just walked, eyes forward, ears open. The cameras picked up the next whisper before they did. Playback would later reveal it. At minute 43 of the third segment. 3 words again. You came back. Maya stopped filming for a while after that. She didn't explain why. She just clicked the camera off and left it hanging on her chest strap. Jordan tried to joke. You afraid the cave wants to be interviewed? No answer. They walked slower now. And the cave responded. The third whisper of the day came without warning. They were crouching through a low passage, stone brushing against their backpacks, when the sound echoed behind them like a pebble dropped in a well. 3 words again. This time, Jordan heard them inside his own breathing. Count your steps. He stopped crawling. His legs shook. What? Maya asked. I think it just told me to count. Count what? My steps. He did. From that point forward. 114 steps later, they returned to a chamber they'd filmed in an hour before. Same mineral flow on the wall. Same ceiling pattern. Maya recognized the half-moon notch carved into the limestone. But something was different. On the floor, where Jordan had scuffed a mark earlier, was a new word, drawn in chalk they hadn't used. 3 letters, her. They hadn't written it. They hadn't even spoken it. And when they turned around, the tunnel behind them was unfamiliar. The chalk arrows? Gone. Maya unfolded the map again. The edges were wet. She hadn't dropped it. It hadn't rained. But the paper was damp, as though it had been sweating. The ink in the corners had begun to bleed slightly, especially around one symbol, a red triangle she hadn't noticed before. It pulsed faintly under her light, like the ink had a sheen that hadn't been there before. Below it, in her great-grandfather's faint handwriting, 3rd voice begins here. They didn't speak much after that. They just listened. And the cave, whatever part of it had noticed them, kept speaking in patterns of 3. 3 forks in the path. 3 chalk marks removed. 3 lines appearing on the map without human hand. And 3 words whispered. Always just out of reach. Always just close enough to hear. At camp that night, a sloped slab of stone they used as a rest stop, they tried to sleep in shifts. Maya drifted in and out, her eyes fluttering to the rhythm of water dripping nearby. Jordan counted under his breath. At 3:47 a.m., Maya sat upright. She didn't know why. She just felt it. She looked to her right. Jordan was asleep. To her left was the sound of breathing. But no one was there. 3 slow inhales. Then silence. Somewhere deep inside Mammoth Cave, a 3rd voice had joined them. It did not introduce itself. It simply waited. By the 4th day underground, direction lost its meaning. They still moved, feet forward, one tunnel into another, but movement no longer guaranteed progress. Tunnels blurred, landmarks repeated, and the cave, silent but aware, began to behave less like a place and more like a pattern. Jordan counted everything now. Steps, bends, water drips. Maya said little. She stared at the map too often, as if expecting it to correct itself. But it didn't. It worsened. The route they had planned, based on the faded diagram passed down through Maya's family, no longer aligned with what they saw. Narrow junctions opened into yawning chambers that weren't drawn. Paths that should have forked never did. A marked return loop now ended in solid stone. Jordan was the first to say it aloud. "We're not lost," he muttered, voice dry from silence. "We're being misremembered." Maya looked up sharply. "What? This place isn't confused. We are. And I think it's doing that to us." She didn't argue, because deep down, she had already begun to feel it too. They had passed the same rock outcropping 3 times. At first, they assumed it was coincidence. Natural formations repeat. Shadows play tricks. But when Jordan leaned in on their third pass and scraped a line into the stone with the edge of his multi-tool, just a shallow, deliberate groove, he marked it with an arrow and the time, 10:41 a.m. When they passed it again at 11:12, the mark was gone. No scratch, no arrow, just smooth, unblemished stone, like it had never been touched. They checked the footage. Jordan had filmed the marking, had narrated it. The clip was clear. But when Maya scrolled back through the files later that afternoon, that clip was gone. Not corrupted, not blurry, just absent. 37 minutes of recorded footage vanished from the card. Jordan stood still for a long time after that. Not angry, not scared, just quiet. The kind of quiet people get when they finally realize something isn't going to let them win. At camp that night, Maya unfolded the map again. She didn't say anything at first. Then, slowly, she held it out to Jordan. He studied it in the glow of his headlamp. A new line had appeared. Thin, pale red, faint like a vein under skin. It led from their current tunnel to a chamber labeled Kinney's Fall. Jordan traced it with his finger. "Who's Kinney?" he asked. Maya stared into the dark. "Harold Kinney," she said softly. "He was a mapmaker, surveyor. Disappeared here. 1920-something. Jordan didn't respond at first. Then, "And you didn't think to mention that before?" "I didn't think the cave would know who he was." Jordan swallowed. "But now it's drawing his name." Maya folded the map without another word. They pressed deeper the next morning. Not out of confidence, but necessity. There was no going back anymore. Their markers kept erasing. Their bearings, twisted. They had to move forward, if only to find a new edge. The third tunnel they entered that day felt too wide. Wider than it should have been. The ceiling rose out of sight. Their lights couldn't touch the top. Jordan's breath became audible in the silence, not because he was out of breath, but because it was the only sound. Even their footsteps began to soften. No echoes, as if the floor had learned how to absorb sound. "I had a dream last night," Maya said. Jordan didn't answer. There was a stone hallway, but it was breathing. I swear I could feel the lungs, the pulse. Jordan still said nothing. Maya looked over. "Did you hear me?" "I'm afraid if I answer," he said softly, "it'll hear us too." By midday, they had reached what should have been a known junction, Fork 8, according to the old survey map. 2 tunnels split left and right. The map showed both. A reliable reentry point. A minor victory. But this time, there were 3 tunnels. 3. No natural explanation. No collapse. Just an extra mouth in the stone. One that hadn't existed before. No markings. No airflow. Just silence leaking from its throat like oil. Jordan took a step toward it. "I think this one wants us." Maya grabbed his arm. "No, we stick to the plan." "What plan?" He looked at her. Tired, hungry, face streaked with limestone dust. "There's no plan anymore." They took the left path, the one from the map. But 5 minutes in, the walls began to tighten. Slowly, subtly. Jordan's backpack scraped against the stone. Then his shoulders. Then they both had to crouch. It wasn't a crawl space before. "I don't remember this," Maya whispered. "Neither does the cave." 10 minutes later, the tunnel widened again. Into a room they'd seen before. Same stone shelf on the left wall. Same narrow crevice they'd tested with a glow stick. Same mark. Jordan's scratched initials, still faintly visible this time. They had looped. Maya dropped to her knees. Not in exhaustion, but resignation. "It's rewriting us," she whispered. Jordan turned off his light. Sat in the dark. "What do you mean?" "I mean we're in the story now. Not telling it. Not recording it. We're part of what the cave remembers." He said nothing, but she could hear him counting again. Steps, drips, breaths, like numbers could hold him together. At camp that night, they slept with lights on. When Maya woke, the camera bag was gone. Not emptied, not ransacked, Just gone, as if it had never existed. But the camera itself, the one she wore on her chest, was still there, recording. And when she played the last clip before sleeping, the video showed her laying down and someone kneeling beside her. Not Jordan, not her, just a shape. Still, watching. The clip ended in static. 3 pulses, then black. Wrong turns happen in caves. That's expected. But in Mammoth Cave, some turns don't take you in the wrong direction. They take you out of time, out of memory, until even the map forgets your name. They found it by accident. A long descent, slow and angled, brought them into a chamber that felt unfinished, as if the rock had stopped growing mid-thought. It was quiet here, not the silence of distance, but the kind that holds something back, as if the sound had been asked to leave. They nearly missed it, half buried in a crack behind a broken stalagmite. A box, rusted metal, sides flaking like bark, wrapped in something like waxed leather, the straps cracked but intact. Someone had placed it there deliberately, protected it, hid it. Maya reached for it first. The leather peeled away with a dry whisper. Inside was a small, leather-bound journal, faded brown, edges worn soft. The pages were still dry, still intact, still readable. The name etched inside the front cover stopped her breath. Harold Kinney, U.S. Geological Survey, March 1925. She handed it to Jordan without speaking. He turned the pages slowly. They were filled with cartographers' notes, elevation sketches, tunnel angles, soil density. Then, around the halfway mark, the handwriting shifted. Neat lines gave way to crowded ones. Sentences curved downward on the page. Descriptions lost their structure. Something had changed. March 9th, tunnel branches split into 5. I marked 3. The other 2 weren't there before. March 10th, I returned to my earlier point. Chamber gone. Same footprints. No wall. March 11th, there's a sound that follows me. Not echo. Not wind. March 12th, voices. Always 3 words. I cannot repeat them. March 13th, the cave is moving. It's folding itself like paper. I walked in a straight line and ended up behind myself. March 14th, I hear breathing. But I am not tired. March 15th, the final entry was smudged. But one phrase repeated, written 3 times down the page. Not echo. Not echo. Not echo. Jordan looked at Maya. I thought this was a myth. So did I. Maya pulled the map out again. The lines looked the same, but one thing was different. A name, in faint red ink, had appeared near the lower left corner. H. Kinney, not a destination. A label, as if the man himself had become a part of the map. Not a memory, a feature. They sat in silence, just for a minute. Maya opened her voice recorder. She wanted to document it. The find, the journal, Kinney's entries. She pressed record, spoke clearly. This is Maya Ellis, day 5. We found what appears to be the lost journal of Harold Kinney. Documented surveyor, 1925. Preserved in a sealed box. Last entries refer to voice patterns, directional anomalies, and structural instability. She paused. A faint rustle. She turned to Jordan, expecting confirmation. He hadn't moved. The rustle came again, this time behind them. They turned off their lights and waited. In total blackness, the rustle grew clearer. Not footsteps, not dripping water. Paper. Pages turning. But the journal was in Jordan's hands. He gripped it tighter. Still, the sound continued, as if another journal, nearby, was being flipped through in the dark, by someone else. Then silence. Not empty. Expectant. They turned their lights back on. Nothing. Just walls. But the journal was now open to a page they hadn't reached yet. A new entry, written in fresh ink. Not smudged. Still drying. The handwriting was similar, but not quite Kinney's. It said, they read the words. Now the cave remembers them. They didn't speak for a while. Maya looked down at the recording device still in her hand. The red light was off. She pressed play. Static. And then, a whisper. Not her voice. Not Jordan's. 3 words. You opened it. They closed the journal gently. Wrapped it again. Placed it back inside the box. Neither of them said what they were both thinking, that it would be worse to keep it. Worse to carry it further. As they stood to leave, Jordan turned around. Wait. There was a new tunnel behind them. A narrow crack in the wall that hadn't been there minutes before. I swear to God, he muttered. We came in through the other side. Maya nodded. I know. They walked through it anyway. Because the other passage, the one they did recognize, was gone. as if the cave had watched them read, and changed shape accordingly. For the rest of that day, the voices grew louder. Still 3 words. Still random. But now they came from different places. Sometimes behind. Sometimes from within. Once, Maya heard them while drinking water. From inside the bottle. A whisper, muffled by plastic. She said nothing. Just kept walking. That night, they camped in a dry crevice. No signs of life. No airflow. Jordan opened his pack. Inside was the journal. They had left it behind. Wrapped. Sealed. Placed back where they found it. But now it was here. Open to a page neither of them had seen. This time, no words. Just a drawing. 2 small dots. A line between them. Then another loop. And the faint outline of a human figure. The dots were labeled, today and before. The cave didn't just remember Kinney. It had remembered them. And now, it was drawing their path. But not the one they were walking. The one that would loop. The one that would bring them back to somewhere they'd never left. They descended through a split in the rock they didn't remember choosing. It was barely wide enough for their shoulders. Not tight. Just close. Like it had formed around them. The light from Jordan's headlamp flickered once. No battery warning. No bump. Just a soft blink. Maya's lamp dimmed too, but when she checked, it still read full charge. They didn't talk. They didn't ask questions. They just moved downward, because the tunnel sloped that way, and because turning back was no longer an option they trusted. After 20 minutes of steady, downward crawl, the walls widened suddenly. Not gradually. Suddenly. They stepped into a chamber that felt wrong. There was no breeze. No echo. The air didn't shift at all when they moved. It was like stepping into a jar, sealed, still, self-contained. Jordan waved a hand in front of his face. Nothing. No airflow. He whispered, "It's like the air's been used up." Maya checked her breath. It felt thick. Labored. The kind of breath you take in a room that doesn't want to share. They stood at the edge of the circular space, lights sweeping the walls. Perfectly round. No jagged rock. No ledges or columns. Just smooth, glistening limestone. Wet, but not dripping. And in the center of the chamber was a mound. At first, it looked like a cairn. A stack of flat stones. But the closer they got, the more deliberate it appeared. Each stone was engraved. Faint, shallow etchings, not decorative. Names. Just names. First names. Initials. A few full names that had worn away. The topmost stone was smoother than the rest. Jordan leaned down and gently brushed the surface with his sleeve. And there, in the slick sheen of calcite, Ellis, M., he froze. Maya stepped beside him, reading over his shoulder. There it was, her name. Not just her first name. Her surname. Her initial. Engraved like it had always been there. Like the stone had grown around it. Below that, another name. Carved thinner, less deeply, but still legible. Sorrel J. Jordan stepped back like it had burned him. This isn't right. Maya didn't answer. She walked slowly around the mound. Dozens of stones, each bearing a name. Some old, some new, some fresh enough the dust still clung to their lines. One read, Kinney, H. She dropped to one knee, reached toward it. Her fingers hovered inches above the surface, but she didn't touch it. Why are our names here? Jordan asked. Maya whispered. Because the cave already decided we'd come. He shook his head. No, this was made after we got here. That has to be it. Does it matter? They both turned slowly, facing the tunnel behind them. It was gone. The way they'd entered was now wall. Smooth. Damp. Seamless. No crack. No crawl space. Just a solid surface where they had walked minutes ago. Maya walked toward it anyway. Touched it. It was real. Cool. Unyielding. She didn't panic. Not externally. Just leaned her forehead against the stone and whispered, "Okay." Jordan's breath had grown ragged. He sat down on the ground. Counted. 1 to 20. Then back. Then forward again. Time moved differently in the chamber. Not faster. Not slower. Just away from them. Minutes passed like water through cloth. They checked their watches. Jordan's read 4:12 p.m. Maya's 2:47. They hadn't adjusted time zones. Both were synced. They waited for 5 minutes. When they checked again, Jordan's watch said 6:40. Maya said nothing. The screen had gone black. Jordan stood suddenly and turned his camera on. "I'm going to film this," he said. Proof. The lens turned toward the mound of names. As it focused, the autofocus struggled. Click. Blur. Click. Blur. Then stillness. When he played it back, the footage jumped. From the start of the shot, to Maya, standing on the other side of the chamber. But she hadn't moved. She had been beside him the whole time. He played it again. Same result. She was there, then there, without the space between. "I think it's recording versions of us," he whispered. "Not what's happening. Just what the cave remembers." They decided to leave. No discussion, just action. They began testing the walls. Every inch. Feeling for seams, airflow, anything. After 10 minutes, Maya pressed her hand against a portion of the wall near where they'd entered. Her palms sank in slightly. Not enough to break through. Just enough to ripple. Like water. She yanked her hand back. Stone again. Then the lights flickered. First Jordan's. Then Maya's. Not out. Just dim. Their breathing grew heavier. Not fear. Oxygen. The chamber had none. They began to feel it in their shoulders. Then their temples. The ache. The thinning of thought. They needed to leave. Now. Jordan turned toward the mound of names. "This isn't a memorial," he whispered. "It's a ledger." Maya looked at him. A record of what? Not death. Not exactly. He paused. A record of who the cave is keeping. And then, without transition, without understanding, the chamber changed. A breeze moved through it. Soft and sour. A sound stirred, like a single inhale in a great throat. They turned their lights toward the far wall. A tunnel had opened. No crack. No dust. Just there, waiting. They didn't hesitate. They stepped toward it. And behind them, the mound of names seemed to settle slightly, as if shifting deeper into the ground, as if making room. They didn't look back, because they knew the names wouldn't need to be written again. They were already remembered. They walked upward, not because they were certain, but because air meant hope. And air, faint and musty as it was, had finally returned. The new tunnel felt older than the last. Not ancient in age, but in usage. It didn't look carved. It looked used, by something that had no name and left no tracks. The floor sloped gently, but not steadily. Sometimes it climbed. Sometimes it fell. It was like walking inside a muscle that spasmed just slightly with every step. But they kept going. There was no other choice. Jordan stopped speaking altogether. He'd been counting for days, steps, seconds, passages, but the numbers had begun to repeat. He'd reached 542 steps, then lost track, then started again, and somehow, always ended back at 542. He tried starting from different numbers. Still the same. He finally stopped. Let the silence count for him. Maya, meanwhile, watched the walls. Not the path. The walls seemed to pulse in her peripheral vision. She thought she could see moisture moving, sideways, like condensation being pushed along by unseen fingers. She didn't say this to Jordan. She knew, by now, that speaking certain things out loud seemed to make them more real. After nearly an hour of walking, they found an opening. Not a tunnel, not a chamber. A literal crack in the rock where light shone through. Daylight. White. Pure. Clean. Jordan let out something between a laugh and a sob. They scrambled upward, slipping on stone, clawing at roots. The passage was jagged, cut like a wound. But above them was sky. Not cave ceiling. Not reflection. Sky. They emerged gasping, dragging their gear, blinking hard against the glare. They were back. The earth smelled different here, green, wet, alive. Birdsong rang faintly through trees. The breeze moved freely, touching their faces like a forgotten name. They stood there for minutes, unmoving, letting it wash over them, letting the tension burn out from their shoulders, their lungs. But then, they began to look around, and the relief started to peel away. It wasn't the right place. Not quite. They recognized the terrain, sort of. The trees were familiar, the slope of the ridge, the bend in the horizon. But things were wrong. A log Maya had filmed 3 days ago was here, but rotted through, collapsed in a way it hadn't been. The patch of moss near the trailhead was larger, and the soil below it had turned to soft, black loam. Jordan found a discarded granola wrapper, one he dropped and picked up earlier, lying on the ground. But it was damp, and the ink had faded, as if it had been there a long, long time. Maya pulled out the map. It had changed again. New lines. The tunnel they'd just left was marked now, drawn in red ink. Next to it, 2 names had appeared. M. Ellis J. Sorrel. Jordan took a step back. It's tracking us. Maya didn't speak. The map didn't feel like guidance anymore. It felt like documentation. They turned to leave, to head toward the ranger station, find a road, find help. But something shifted behind them. The tunnel entrance they'd just emerged from was gone. Vanished. Replaced by a solid wall of moss and stone. Not hidden. Erased. Back at the parking area, things were almost normal. Their rental car was still there, but dustier. Leaves piled under the tires. Like it had sat longer than 5 days. Maya checked her phone. No signal. She turned it off. Turned it back on. Still nothing. Jordan's phone was dead. Battery full just hours before. They made it to a road after half a day of walking. Thumbed a ride into town. Explained they'd gotten lost hiking. Downplayed the time underground. The gas station clerk said, happens all the time. But he said it while staring at Maya for a moment too long. Like he almost recognized her. From something he didn't want to remember. Back at their motel, the clerk blinked in surprise when they walked in. You two checked out 5 days ago, she said. Didn't think you were coming back. Maya looked at the calendar behind her. The date was 10 days ahead of when they'd left. They had lost 5 days. Maybe more. Inside the room, everything was as they'd left it. Except for the camera. It was sitting on the nightstand, plugged in. No one had packed it. They'd taken it with them. But it was here. Fully charged. Still recording. Jordan picked it up and checked the files. The last video showed them exiting the cave. But when the footage played, something was wrong. Maya wasn't in it. He was alone. Talking to her. Responding to her. But she wasn't in the frame. At all. Maya played it back. Same result. Then they checked the previous video. She was there. Jordan wasn't. For 3 videos in a row, only one of them appeared. Always speaking to the other. Always acting like they were together. But never both. Not once. Jordan put the camera down slowly. I think he didn't finish. Neither wanted to be the one to say it. They slept without dreams. But the next morning, Maya woke first. Her camera bag was gone. Again. She found it outside the door. Inside, the map. The logbook. And a new sheet of paper, folded tightly. It had a list. Just names. Some faded, some bold. Her name was third from the top. Jordan's was nowhere on it. She walked back inside. He was still sleeping. She called his name. He didn't stir. She touched his shoulder. He vanished. No noise. No flicker. Just gone. And the air in the room, suddenly still. Like the cave had followed her out. Because sometimes, exit isn't up. It's backward. Or inward. Or into someone else's memory. And sometimes, when you finally crawl your way out, you realize the cave let only one of you go. 2 weeks later, Maya still hadn't posted the footage. She'd told herself she needed time to review everything, to rest, to understand what had happened. But the truth was simpler. She was afraid, not of what she saw on the tapes, but of what she didn't. She could no longer remember the exact moment they got out of the cave. Only afterward, the wind, the light, the way her lungs hurt when the air returned. Everything before that felt like dream fragments, shuffled and incomplete. But the map remembered. It was no longer just paper. It changed when she wasn't watching. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just a new line here. A faint arrow there. A circle drawn around a chamber she'd never entered, but somehow knew existed. Once, she left it folded in her backpack overnight. The next morning, it was open on her table. A red ink had appeared near the bottom. No label. No path to it. Just a single point. When she pressed her finger to it, she felt nothing. But that night, she dreamed of a tunnel with no floor. Just a drop. And a voice at the bottom saying her name. She didn't tell anyone. Jordan had vanished from the footage, from her messages, from the world. She checked online, his social media, his email, the address he'd given her. Nothing. No digital trace. No voicemail. It was like the cave had taken him, but left the space where he'd been. A hollow absence in every scene where he should have existed. And then the logbook changed too. Harold Kinney's journal. She had locked it in a drawer. When she took it out again, it felt heavier. She flipped through the pages. New handwriting. Neat. Familiar. Her own. It had filled 3 pages. Day unknown. The walls shifted again. I saw Jordan for a moment, but he was behind the stone, talking like I was there. But I wasn't. The chamber with the mound is getting smaller. The names are sinking deeper. I think I'm being overwritten. My voice sounds different on camera. Higher. Not mine. The map knows where I've been before I do. Something is still watching. She closed the journal. Didn't open it again. But she didn't throw it away, either. She kept it next to the camera. And every time she tried to format the memory card, it wouldn't let her. The files wouldn't delete. Even factory resets failed. One video began appearing randomly. She never saved it, never filmed it, never edited it. Just a slow pan of the cave walls. No music, no voices. Only a single whisper, looped 3 times. She drew the door. She stopped sleeping well after that. Shadows stretched too long in her apartment. Reflections in her kitchen faucet didn't always match her movements. Once, she opened her closet and found her hiking boots wet. She hadn't touched them since they left the cave. The laces were tied in knots she didn't remember. There was dirt under the soles, fine, damp limestone grit. She lived 300 miles from Mammoth Cave. The final straw came when her laptop powered itself on. She had left it shut, battery drained. It was on the desk one morning. Open, on the YouTube dashboard. A video was already uploaded. Unlisted. Titled, "We're Not Alone in the Maps." She hadn't made it. She played it once. It opened with silence. Then flickering light. Then her voice, calm and steady, narrating. But she didn't remember saying the words. And the footage showed places they hadn't filmed. Chambers they'd never reached. Hallways that bent wrong. Other people just out of focus. Faces turned to stone. Mouths half open. Some looked like they had once been park rangers. Others looked older, in clothes from different decades. One face, brief, in the corner, looked like her. Younger, dirtier. Eyes wide, looking directly into the lens. The whisper came at the end, just like always. 3 words. Map draws memory. She tried deleting the video, but the next day, it re-uploaded itself. With a different title. You left someone behind. And this time, the comments were turned off. Not by her. That night, Maya left her apartment and drove for hours. She didn't bring the journal. She didn't bring the map. But when she arrived at a roadside motel and opened her bag, they were there. Folded neatly. Placed on top of her clothes. The map now had 4 names written on it. She didn't recognize 2 of them. But the 3rd was hers. And the 4th was her mother's maiden name. She checked again. A new red line had appeared. Traced from the edge of the map to the center. It pulsed slightly, like breath. She placed the map face down. But even then, she could still feel it. Drawing. Changing. Remembering. Later, she opened her camera one last time. And inside the footage, she saw something new. Not a cave. Not a tunnel. A room. Her room. Her apartment. Seen from the corner. Unmoving. Empty. Except for her, asleep on the couch. And something standing over her. Not shadow. Not figure. Just a blur. A human shape that didn't hold still long enough to be named. The camera panned slightly, and then turned off. No one ever heard from Maya again after that week. Her apartment was found intact. The lights were on. The sink was running. The journal sat on the table. The map had been burned at one corner, but never finished. Only one thing was left scrawled on the back in rushed handwriting. The cave doesn't want to keep you. It wants to draw you so it doesn't forget what you were. You won't find it on the official maps. Not the tunnel Maya entered. Not the chamber with the mound of names. Not the path that split into 3 when there should have only been 2. You can ask the rangers. Most will smile politely. Some will nod like they've heard the question before. But none of them will confirm what you're looking for. Because Mammoth Cave doesn't keep records. It keeps stories. And only the ones it chooses. Maya Ellis's name does not appear in the park's missing persons logs. She signed back in. Left the trailhead. Checked out of her motel. The system sees her as returned. But no one has seen her since. Jordan Sorrell's name is more complicated. There is no formal record of him booking the motel. No record of him passing ranger checkpoints. No paper trail beyond a credit card charge, now closed for inactivity. But his voice remains. In the footage. In the echoes. Sometimes, hikers have reported hearing a man say the same 3 words. Keep walking. Please. The video Maya left behind, "We're Not Alone in the Maps," has reappeared multiple times. It was removed, then re-uploaded by anonymous accounts. Different thumbnails, different lengths, always the same content. But depending on who's watching, it changes. Some see Maya walking alone. Others claim to see themselves, faces they don't remember filming, wearing their own clothes, mouthing words they've never said. The location tags jump between counties. Sometimes the video title shows up in another language. But always, the comments are closed. And at the end, there's silence. Then a single phrase, "Remember your name." Deep in the forums where urban legends ferment and mutate, a theory took root. They call it the memory loop. It suggests the cave doesn't trap people in the traditional sense. It doesn't crush, drown, or bury. It records. Not video, not voice, identity. Every person who steps too far, who listens too long, who speaks in a chamber that wasn't meant to be spoken in, leaves something behind. And over time, that imprint begins to rewrite itself into the landscape. A faint outline in stone, a name on a cairn, a route that appears on no map until it's been walked once, then walked again, then drawn in red. An ex-ranger, anonymous, posting under the handle Echo Thread 77, once said in a now-deleted thread, "The cave doesn't pull people in. It doesn't have to. People offer themselves to it. And once it's accepted you, you're never really gone. It doesn't want your body. It wants the shape of your memory." The post ended with a photo, a map, hand-drawn, faded, and in the lower right corner, a new label, Ellis Loop, unstable. The map's origin was never verified. Sometimes tourists report odd things near the restricted areas. A tripod left behind with no hiker nearby. A pair of boots, still tied, just outside an unmarked shaft. A whisper recorded on a phone that wasn't heard in person. Rangers confiscate most of these. Call them echo artifacts. Say it's the acoustics, the wind, or underground water shifting in old mines. But not everyone accepts that. And some of the guides, the ones who've walked the caves for years, have started to bring small pieces of chalk with them. They draw symbols near branch points, just in case. One woman, a seasonal worker, said this: "There's a place past Great Relief Hall, unlisted. Sometimes when I go there alone, I hear names, spoken soft, like someone forgot they were saying them. I wrote mine down once, just to test it. Came back a week later. It was carved into the wall." She didn't return after that season. A legend has begun to spread, quietly, softly, the way moss spreads over stone. They say that once a year, on the exact day Maya and Jordan disappeared, a new tunnel opens briefly. No warning, no sign, just a mouth in the limestone, breathing shallow, waiting. Those who enter never go far. Most turn back, but some claim, before the passage closes, they see a woman standing inside. Not threatening, not lost, just waiting, map in one hand, camera in the other. And if you listen carefully, really carefully, you'll hear her ask 3 words: "Do you remember?" And then it's gone. Mammoth Cave is the longest known cave system in the world. But no one knows how long it was before it was found, before the lines were drawn, before explorers gave names to the dark. Because some places are not meant to be mapped. They are meant to remember you. So if you ever find yourself near the edge of a tunnel not found on any map, one with air that doesn't move, with walls that listen, with silence that breathes, stop. Count your steps. Speak no names. Mark nothing. And walk backward, slowly, until the cave forgets you were ever there. If that gave you chills, like the video, share it with someone who sleeps with the lights off, and hit subscribe, or the next photo might have you in it. Tap the bell. The next story drops soon.